Jai Anilo Premadano Paramakacho Jasonandana Rajajanarandana Jasonandana Rajajanarandana Jamunatira Ramunatira Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 1, Text number 19. Tatraikavayavam dhyayet Tatraikavayavam dhyayet Avyuchinena cetasa Avyuchinena cetasa Mano nirvishayam yuktva Mano nirvishayam yuktva Tataha kinchanas nasmaret Tata kinchana nasmaret Padam tat paramam Vishnu Padam tat paramam Vishnu Mano yatra prasidati Mano yatra prasidati Tatraikavayam dhyayet Tatraikavayam dhyayet Avyuchinena cetasa Mano nirvishayam yuktva Tataha kinchana nasmaret Padam tat paramam Vishnu Mano yatra prasidati
Tatraikavayavam dhyayet Avyuchinena cetasa Mano nirvishayam yuktva Tata kinchana nasmaret Padam tat paramam Vishnu Mano yatra prasidati.
Mano yatra prasidati. Abhishnena cetasa. Mano nirvishayam yukva. Tata kinchana smare. Paramam Vishnu. Mano yatra prasidati.
Tatrikavayavam dhyaye.
Tatrikavayavam dhyaye.
Abhyuchinena cetasa.
Abhishnena cetasa.
Mano nirvishayam yukva.
Mano nirvishayam yukva.
Kinchana smare.
Kinchana smare.
Tatparamam Vishnu.
Paramam Vishnu.
Mano yatra prasidati.
Mano yatra prasidati.
Tatrikavayavam dhyaye.
Tatrikavayavam dhyaye.
Abhyuchinena cetasa.
Abhishnena cetasa.
Mano nirvishayam yukva.
Mano nirvishayam yukva.
Tata kinchana smare.
Tata kinchana smare.
Paramam Vishnu.
Paramam Vishnu.
Mano yatra prasidati.
Mano yatra prasidati.
Tatra, thereafter. Eka, one by one. Avayavam, limbs of the body. Yayet should be concentrated upon. Avyuchinena, without being deviated from the complete form. Cetasa, by the mind. Manaha, mind. Nirvishayam, without being contaminated by sense objects. Yukta, being dovetailed. Tataha, after that. Kinchana, anything. Na, do not. Smare, think of. Padam, personality. Tat, that. Paramam, supreme. Vishnu, of Vishnu. Manaha, the mind. Yatra, whereupon. Prasidati, becomes reconciled. Purport, translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Thereafter you should meditate upon the limbs of Vishnu, one after another, without being deviated from the conception of the complete body. Thus the mind becomes free from all sense objects. There should be no other thing to be thought upon, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, is the ultimate truth. The mind becomes completely reconciled in Him only. Purport: foolish persons, bewildered by the external energy of Vishnu, do not know that the ultimate goal of the progressive search after happiness is to get in touch directly with Lord Vishnu, the Personality of Godhead. Vishnu Tattva is an unlimited expansion of different transcendental forms of the Personality of Godhead, and the supreme or original form of Vishnu Tattva is Govinda, or Lord Krishna, the supreme cause of all causes. Therefore, thinking of Vishnu or meditating upon the transcendental form of Vishnu, specifically upon Lord Krishna, is the last word on the subject of meditation. This meditation may be begun from the lotus feet of the Lord. One should not, however, forget or be misled from the complete form of the Lord. Thus, one should practice thinking of the different parts of His transcendental body one after another. Here in this verse, it is definitely assured that the Supreme Lord is not impersonal. He is a person, but His body is different from those of conditioned persons like us. Otherwise, meditation beginning from the pranava omkar up to the limbs of the personal body of Vishnu would not have been recommended by Sukadeva Goswami for the attainment of complete spiritual perfection. The Vishnu forms of worship in great temples of India are not therefore arrangements of idol worship, as they are wrongly interpreted to be by a class of men with a poor fund of knowledge. Rather, they are different spiritual centers of meditation on the transcendental limbs of the body of Vishnu. The worshipable deity in the temple of Vishnu is identical with Lord Vishnu by the inconceivable potency of the Lord. Therefore, neophyte's concentration or meditation upon the limbs of Vishnu in the temple, as contemplated in the revealed scriptures, is an easy opportunity for meditation for persons who are unable to sit down tightly at one place and then concentrate upon pranava, omkar, or the limbs of the body of Vishnu, as recommended herein by Sukadeva Goswami, the great authority. The common man can benefit more by meditating on the form of Vishnu in the temple than on omkar, the spiritual combination of a, u, as explained before. There is no difference between omkar and the forms of Vishnu, but persons unacquainted with the science of absolute truth try to create dissension by differentiating between the forms of Vishnu and that of omkar. Here it is indicated that the Vishnu form is the ultimate goal of meditation, and as such it is better to concentrate upon the forms of Vishnu than on impersonal omkar. The latter process is also more difficult than the former. We remember when reading this, the texts of the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna asks Krishna, which is better, to meditate on the impersonal feature of the Supreme, or to meditate on the personal form of the Lord. And Krishna replies to Arjuna, much as Srila Prabhupada has explained in his purport, that it is very difficult to meditate on any impersonal conception of God. And those who do so simply get trouble. And therefore he says it is better to meditate on the personal form of the Lord. And of course this is the focus of our Krishna Consciousness movement from the very start, from the time of Srila Prabhupada registering ISKCON, in which he was recommended to name the society International Society for God Consciousness. And Prabhupada refused that idea, saying, no, if I say God Consciousness, then people will have so many different conceptions of who God is. And we see that even nowadays people have a conception of themselves as God. That is also very common. One book I was reading, it was discussing the different models of God. It's called a model of God, just as the model of God as a creator, God as a creator, or another model is God as a father, or some say model is God as a mother. And then one person said God is me. And that's the model. I am God. So in order to avoid such foolishness, Prabhupada said Krishna consciousness clearly, so that there will be no disagreement in this regard. It is interesting to see how impersonalists even like to worship the deity. I had one experience when I was in Hyderabad. I was doing the program there, and because we were the first foreigners to show up, Hindu foreigners, it was a big event to the city. And unfortunately, not for us, but for another, it was a big event, unfortunate event for another person, namely the Shankar Acharya of Puri, who happened to be in Hyderabad. Shankaracharya's Sampradaya has 4 main seats, one of which is in Puri. So the Acharya of that seat had come over to Hyderabad to hold this program, and without recognizing that we had booked our programs for the same time that he had. And the result was that we drew about 5 times more people. So he decided to engage some of his followers in distributing pamphlets at our meeting, which said that anyone who hears these foreigners speak is sure to go to hell. So I noticed that they were leafleting in the audience while I was speaking. So I stopped my speaking to ask what the leaflet was about. So I had one of them brought up, and I had someone translate it for me. And then I asked anyone that I will stop speaking now, you're all free. I'll give you a few minutes, you can all leave if you wish, so that you can save yourself from going to hell. Of course, nobody got up and left. And I said, well, then I think we should give some more time to these people who are giving leaflets out, because I'm about to start speaking again, and I don't want them to go to hell. So the organizers of our meeting said, well, we will help them to get out of here. And they immediately threw them out. Anyway, it came to my notice at the time that someone told me that actually someone said that this Shankaracharya is actually a worshiper of Radha Krishna, because he used to travel with Radha Krishna deities. So normally we don't think that that's what impersonals do, but they do. They do sometimes worship Radha Krishna. However, their intention of worship is totally different. Because what is their meditation? Their meditation is simply that I need some temporary assistance to focus my senses. But ultimately, their ambition is that everything merges in oneness. In other words, Radha Krishna is no more real, ultimately, for them than their own bodies. So they use this sometimes as a crutch for worship, but only for the idea I must regulate myself, I must focus my senses so that I can come to the point of meditation on oneness. That does indicate that worshiping a deity or concentrating on the limbs of the Lord is in itself not a guarantee of success. In other words, most important of all is what is the mind thinking of? How are we relating with the Lord? Because as soon as you establish relationship with another, it implies that you have to identify yourself in relationship to that object that you're worshiping. So in the same way, our bhakti process is like that. There are 5 rasas: neutrality, servitude, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love for the Lord. And as we worship the deity, then gradually the eternal relationship which we have with the Lord will be revealed. Yesterday, one scholar was visiting here, and he's quite a nice person. So he has written a book about devotional service, Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti. And so we began to discuss, and he was asking me, what is the difference between the Gaudiya Vaishnavas and the Babajis of Radhakund, because both of them practice Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti. So I explained that the difference is that in Radhakund, their idea is that a guru tells you your eternal relationship with Krishna and tells you your eternal name and your form and all the details, even now in the conditioned stage. And then you hold that idea within your mind, meditating on it, and in this way you make advancement. Of course, there are some problems with this, because the difficulty, first of all, the guru must be very qualified. For someone to be able to look at you and know who you are in Krishna's Leela, is certainly a remarkable achievement. And nowadays, as the Kali Yuga progresses, one wonders if such qualified persons are there. The second thing is that if you still have material desires, and you start meditating that I am such and such person in Krishna's pastimes, but if you have material desires, how do you make the two fit together? So that creates a lot of problems. So very often the only way is to fulfill those material desires, because it's very hard to withstand material desires in the conditioned stage. And yet if you're told that you have to constantly identify yourself as an eternal liberated person, then you start to try to imagine that you can fulfill those material desires within that spiritual identity. And so you mix in mundane life with the transcendental affairs of Krishna. And we read about such really, very externalized caricatures. This one fellow, Rupa Kaviraj, during the time of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he, would dress up in the form, female form as a gopi, and he recommended that that's what his followers should do. But the problem, of course, is that they still may have had material desires. So going around dressed in this extraordinary way and trying to also at the same time, or having to find a way to fulfill material desires, it becomes a mockery of spiritual life. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, being a strict follower of Srila Rupa Goswami, rejected this, notion of sadhana bhakti. And he said that, first of all, he quoted from authoritative statements of Rupa Goswami to show that one's eternal relationship, one's relationship with Krishna is eternal. It is not something which is given new by the Guru. This scholar who came here yesterday described the idea as something like if you were going into a clothing store and there was a clothing rack with different coats, so your Guru finds a coat which will fit you and says, here, put this on. This one would be nice for you. So that type of system is not actually there. According to Rupa Goswami, we have eternally our relationship with Krishna, since time eternal, but it is temporarily covered over. That temporary means it could be a very long time. When we say temporary, just like we say, we're eternal servants of Krishna, but since time immemorial, temporary can also equal time immemorial. Temporary, time immemorial almost sounds like it's eternal. And therefore sometimes it is said Nityabhada. Nityabhada means eternally conditioned. So some other persons have made the argument that this proves that we were never with Krishna. Because the statement is Nityabhada, eternally conditioned. But the word eternal here means it is a type of metaphor for a very, very, very long time, so long that we cannot even remember when it began. In that sense, it is as good as eternal. But actually, it is not eternal. Because eternally, we are Nitya Krishna Das. We're eternally Krishna's servants. So we were with Krishna. And Prabhupada even goes further than that and says, actually, we're always with Krishna. But we do not recognize it. And Maya means simply that there is a cloud of illusion, just like the sun is always shining. The sun is always shining. Yet we may not see the sun at all times. Why? Because there is a cloud of illusion covering the sun. So in the same way, we have our eternal relationship with Krishna. Even now, we are with Krishna. But under the influence of Maya, we cannot understand that. Otherwise, how do you explain that there may be a sudden act, it is possible, a sudden act of, where you can say, the mercy of the Lord descends on a person, and in an instant they can become Krishna conscious. There is such rare circumstances. It's amazing how when a doctor shows up, started exactly from where I left off the last time we were here. Remember, we were talking about this gradual process and sudden. And again, I say, and I'm not, but just to make the point, I'm making a different point today, that it may be that suddenly that one becomes Krishna conscious almost in the flesh. Now, how is that possible unless we have eternally our relationship with Krishna? That is my point. That eternally underlying everything, we have our identity in the pastimes of the Lord. But it is forgotten. It is deep, deep, deep within. Just like sometimes we forget. My brother visited me a couple of weeks ago, and he started to show me these photographs, when I was a child. And I was like, I was trying to think, is this lifetime or is it the past lifetime? And then he was telling me many things because he has lived within those memories very nicely, and he could remember so many things that I had forgotten. But by his association, gradually my remembrance came back. Whether or not I wanted to remember is another question. But it did work by association. So this is the principle, that if we associate with those who remember Krishna, then we will also start to remember Krishna. And therefore it is explained that Krishna consciousness is not like discovering something new, but it is simply remembering what we already knew from the past. It is just like we say, a jewel. A jewel is a jewel, but in its rough form, you cannot see the sparkles and the nice appearance of the jewel. It has to be, polished and cut and polished to bring out its beautiful qualities. So, in the same way, at the present moment, our consciousness needs to be cut and polished, and the whole process is that it is a cutting process. Prabhupada described his guru when he would preach. His technique was called chopping. He would chop away all kinds of ignorance and illusion from those he was preaching to. So this is a cutting away. We have to know, of course, what to let go of. And Rupa Goswami has advised us that don't let go of anything which has its use in Krishna's service. Now, of course, this can be easily abused. Sometimes, I always remember this one example now. Three brothers here from Washington. Well, in the early days of that Washington Potomac temple, you see, the temple president there used to make very elaborate arrangements for whenever Prabhupada would visit. And Prabhupada used to notice that each year when he would visit, his room would be furnished completely new. So after, one year I was there with him, and he said, "Where is everything?" And Prabhupada, was told that because you've come, we wanted to give you everything new. Prabhupada stuck on the point, where is everything? So finally the president admitted that as soon as Prabhupada leaves, everything is distributed as prasad. And of course he was one of the main recipients of the prasad. So, this is not the idea of how to, this is not Nitya Vairagya. This is not the kind of renunciation that Rupa Goswami has advised. We have to be very careful about dovetailing, sense enjoyment in the name of Krishna. And it's not easy. It's dangerous. I only mean to say that temple president was finding a way to, pad his pad with all the paddings that he had gotten for Prabhupada. We have to be cautious about this. There are regulated ways of practicing yoga, offering everything, just like, we have to learn, for example, to cook for Krishna. Now, in the neophyte condition, you think, I really want to eat a coconut cream pie. But you know that if I don't offer that coconut cream pie to Krishna, it's going to bring me karma. It's simple. So, thinking about how much you like to eat coconut cream pies, you get a coconut cream pie made and make sure it's offered so that there's no karma, and then you eat. Well, that's not bad. That's one type of yoga. It's almost bhakti yoga. I wouldn't call it yoga. It's karma mishra bhakti yoga. It's bhakti which is mixed with fruitive desires. It's not shuddha bhakti. It's not pure bhakti. Because in pure bhakti, you would want to ask Krishna, what do you like to eat? Now, Krishna does like to eat coconut cream pies, fortunately. Krishna eats many pies. It's described in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita that Mother Yasoda and Rohini Devi, Krishna's mother and Balaram's mother, and Radharani and her associates would make many pies. And Krishna would begin his meal by eating pies. And then, he would go on to the vegetables and other such items. So, one who is a pure devotee would simply be concerned, what does Krishna like to eat? Raghunath Das Goswami was so austere that he would live simply on a little buttermilk every 2 days. Now, nowadays, if someone doesn't eat for 5 or 6 days, they get in great anxiety. It was like the third I couldn't eat for a week. And he said, I have no, thought even of eating. He said, probably it'll come back to me in Gaurapurnima when I have to fast. But maybe, he's making advancement. Who knows? This could be a turning point in his life, and he's following the path of Raghunath Das Goswami. We will see in the coming weeks. He manifests other symptoms. You'll be watching to see this. Otherwise, we'll know that it was simply a disease. It's the body and mind. But the devotees, they have the spiritual disease. It's a type of madness. And the highest madness is called Mahabhav. This is the madness which Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited because of his being Krishna in the mood of Srimati Radhika. So he exhibited this Mahabhav, which is the highest type of madness. And it appears to be like all the symptoms of material illness. Persons can hallucinate and have fevers and so many different things. But what is a characteristic feature of that madness? Krishna prema. Love for Krishna. Krishna is constantly the focal point of one's attention. And that is, after all, what has to happen in our cooking for Krishna. If Krishna is not the focal point, just like when Mother Sachi, the mother of Lord Chaitanya, would cook, Lord Chaitanya made very certain that Mother Sachi would meditate on, her son and on Krishna. Why? Because Mother Sachi would find that when she cooked, what would happen? She'd offer the food, leave the room to let the deity eat, and when she got back, what happened? The plate was empty. Have you ever had that happen? Well, Mother Sachi had no doubt, and she could not understand, and then gradually everything was revealed to her by her son, Krishna, Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda, and Krishna and Balaram. First of all, she understood that they were the same personalities. She saw them wrestling in the deity room, and she began to understand something about her glorious son. Tomorrow is Gaurapurnima, so it will be an appropriate day, especially we can hear from Chaitanya Bhagavat or Chaitanya Chaitamrita how the pastimes of the Lord were manifested. So when Mother Sachi cooks, she knows very well. She has not this. She's not thinking, I want to eat, or my husband is hungry. She's simply thinking about who she's cooking for. So we have to do that in all our activities. When we chant, what are we thinking about? Are we thinking about my mind is out of control? Or are we thinking about, if I chant really good rounds, I'll get a high score in my examination? Or if I chant really good rounds, Krishna may bless my business. Or if I chant really good rounds, I may not get ill. Or whatever. What should we be thinking? Only we should be thinking, Prabhupada said, let me hear the holy names, the sweet names. If Rupa Goswami has written a beautiful verse, thousands of years, thousands of times, still I would not be satisfied to hear the beautiful glories of Krishna's holy names. So we should be satisfied simply to be absorbed in pastimes of Krishna. And as Prabhupada makes the point here, we have to be very careful not to segment any aspect of the meditation. What does that mean? Not to distinguish, just like if someone is told to worship the lotus feet of the deity, you should not disconnect the feet from the rest of the form. You should know how the whole form is put together. You are worshiping a person. When you do arti, in other words, you're told, right? How many times you're supposed to circle around the feet? How many times around the waist? How many times around the head? So you have to consider now, according to this verse, don't just think of feet, don't just think of waist, and don't just think of head. But see that this is the person, Krishna, that you're offering to. Don't make it so mechanical that it becomes some type of scientific experiment. In other words, the whole thing should be holistically approached. Krishna, and not just his form, but when you do worship of Krishna, if you're worshiping a deity, you have to know something about Krishna. If you don't know something about Krishna's glories, his pastimes, then you will not be able to worship in the right mood. It's not that pujaris should be ignorant of the philosophy. It's not that pujaris should be ignorant of the pastimes of Krishna, nor should the Sankirtan devotees, nor should the workers or the business people or, the doctors or lawyers or whoever it may be. We have to be conscious of Krishna in his entirety. I recall when we first had our temple in Los Angeles, we used to have 5 classes a day. Because Prabhupada we had 5 different books. We had Bhagavad Gita, we had the first canto of the Bhagavatam at the time, we had Ishopanishad, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and Nectar of Devotion. So, because Prabhupada had given us 5 books, we thought it was our duty to read from every one of those 5 books, because Prabhupada had given it. It's like if someone gave you something very valuable, you're supposed to do something with it. You take care of it. So Prabhupada had given us these 5 books. We felt it's our duty to take care of it, to be open to this, and 5 times a day we would meet. Of course, in those days, everyone was fully, supported. All we had to do all day was sit around the temple, read those 5 books, and go out and chant on the street. Nobody was married. There were no children. There were just 50 brahmacharis and brahmacharinis. Reality had not set in yet. We're still in the spiritual world. In our innocence, that was ISKCON in its age of innocence. You see, no, Eve had not given Adam the apple to eat it. No, the serpent's fangs were still withdrawn. So, we had maintained 50 devotees and a temple and $2,000 a month. That's right, and it was a big temple. We had a big property. We had a bunch of 108 rose bushes growing in the front, so we didn't have to buy any flowers for the deities. And Prabhupada, people would ask, Prabhupada, how do you support yourselves? And Prabhupada said, Krishna sends the money. And he meant it. Every day we'd go out, and the only thing we would do was sell back to Godhead magazines. That's how we got our $2,000. There was nobody coming here and putting money in a box. We didn't even have a donation box. There was no such thing. We only learned about this donation box when we went to India. Otherwise, the people who came to our temple wouldn't have understood what to put it in anyway. So, all of the money came from donations from chanting Hare Krishna on the street. And all the time, we were so conscious that everything had to be offered to Krishna. I remember when we would get new dhotis, even new underwear, everything was first offered, before the altar. Because the new cloth was supposed to be blessed by Krishna. Nobody could think of doing anything without offering it to Krishna. No one would drink a drop of water without saying Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu. I mean, there was a water fountain. People used to say Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu, and then they'd turn around and drink. Nobody could think of even, as I said, wearing even any kind of clothing, even underclothing, without it being offered. You see, so the devotees were very conscious of the fact we're living on the mercy of Krishna. And actually that is the mood if you go to, Vrindavan or Navadvip and if you can meet some people who actually live there. This Kinjana, people who are without any material possessions, that's how they live. They just live on the mercy of the Lord. They get a little bit of prasadam, they get some rejected clothing, and somehow they maintain body and soul. And all day long, they chant Hare Krishna. Now, Prabhupada did not exactly recommend that process by his example, nor by his particular instructions, because that stage of life is possible for someone who's very advanced. If you're not very advanced and you try to imitate that position, then, as Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada asks, in his book Vaishnava Cave, what kind of Vaishnava are you? That you are simply trying to imitate Thakur Haridas. Thakur Haridas, is the most elevated person in the universe. Nam Acharya. He's the teacher of how to chant Hare Krishna. Don't try to imitate him artificially. So Prabhupada's example is an example which he set for the world to follow. It is a very practical example. Prabhupada was very practical. He showed us how to live in the Western world, which, he showed us how to live in this world, because practically the whole world is like the Western world then, without becoming entangled. And that is a great art. As Prabhupada said, you have to learn the art of catching a fish without getting wet. In other words, if you go fishing and you hook onto a big one, the chances are it can pull you into the water. But you have to know how to pull the fish out of the water without yourself getting dragged into the water. So if you work within this world, you have to know how to interact with this world without becoming entangled in a network of attachment, which the things of this world are want to bring on. So the worship of the form of the Lord is recommended here. Why? Because we are embodied. We are embodied. It's like we want to see something beautiful. We want to touch something pleasant. We want to smell something nice to smell. We have all of our senses, which are like undisciplined, craving dependence. Just like we have so many young children who are craving so much. They need. Give me. So you have to be able to pacify, not satisfy, because as we're told, the senses are insatiable. They cannot be satisfied. Satisfaction means, I've had enough. The senses will never say that. How many cream pies can you eat where you'll say, okay, that's it? Now look at Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. At the age of 2 or 3, he took a mango and ate it. And his father said, why did you take this mango? This was boba, this was not offered. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada never again in his whole life tasted a mango. He took it so seriously. Now, if you made a mistake like that, could you say that? If you found out that later on that cream pie had never been offered to Krishna, are you prepared? Now you may say, well, yeah, I'll give up a coconut cream pie because I can eat 15 other types of cream pies. But for a 2 or 3 year old child to never again eat a mango, that's very unusual. You'd have to compare that in America to what? Well, I don't know, there's nothing here you can quite equate with a mango, isn't it? Especially a good Indian mango. And especially during the mango season, when it gets so hot. In India, the mango season is, Krishna is so thoughtful that he always compensates. When there's a great difficulty, he sends some great blessing. So the hot season in India is really hot. I think it's something like what we have here in July and August. But the difference is, at least in the old days, there's no air conditioning. You can't avoid the heat. There's no central air conditioning. Some people eventually, now they have air conditioning, but in the old days, I remember what they used to do. We would put, in India, they have this kusha mats. So in the hot season, you put these types of mats, they're like straw, a fragrant straw, kush, and you hang the mat in front of the door and you wet it down. You put water in it, so that the air that comes through goes through this mat, and because of the water, it gives a little cooling sensation. But really, it doesn't relieve. But one boon of the hot weather is the mangoes. And when the mangoes come in, people lose their intelligence. I recall meeting Janak Maharaj, my disciple, Janak Maharaj Das, Chaitanya Das's father. I met him in Bombay. It was in May, April, May. I said, I'm Janak Maharaj, you're here in India. He said, yes. So I said, are you coming back to Texas now to celebrate your Guru's birthday? He was, I could see, he didn't really want to say no, but he wasn't saying yes. So I asked him, is there some other engagement? He said, there's a wedding in the family. So I said, when is the wedding? So then he told me it was like, later in the month of May. I said, well, there's still plenty of time to go back. He said, well, the relatives are all coming from a long distance and probably they'll take extra time there. Anyway, gradually he finally admitted to me that he wanted to stay till the end of the mango season. So the attachment, the taste of mango is so sweet, you see, that it can make a disciple even forget to perform his Guru's Vyasa. So this is the idea behind the sweetness of Krishna. Krishna is so sweet that if one actually tastes the sweetness of Krishna's devotion, then he loses the taste for everything else. Nothing else will matter. Then, as it says, all the rules and all the regulations become secondary in importance, because one is guided by such a taste. But that taste is actually what we are trying to invoke. The whole process of bhakti is to bring about this taste. And then that kind of madness is very nice. That madness where all one can think about morning, noon, and night is Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. And when that happens, then you cannot perform your normal duties. And it is stated that you are not at fault. You are not to be blamed. That even if you can't do any duties, because of your love for Krishna and your service to Krishna, everything is reconciled. There is no fault. But you have to be on that stage. Unless you have such exalted taste for Krishna, if you neglect your duties, then it is a fault. So each person has to know where he or she is at and act accordingly. If we try to imitate the activities of someone beyond our own stage, then it will be inappropriate. Then it's like putting on clothing that doesn't fit. You'll be uncomfortable and it will not protect you. So these are some lessons to be understood from this verse. Are there any questions? Bhakti Henry.
I heard you mention
Bhakti Henry should always be reminding us of our temple at Henry Street. We had a temple in Brooklyn at Henry Street. I think Arjuna, you were there, weren't you? And whenever you see Henry, you can remember Henry Street. We should always try to connect everything in some transcendental way. Okay, Henry Street. Yes.
I heard you mention the word Hindu. Do you usually use that a lot when somebody asks you?
I do. Prabhupada did not, but I have to admit I do. I think that Prabhupada's purpose was regulated on 2 points. One, the philosophy, and the other was the time, place, and circumstance. Philosophically, we should understand that the word Hindu is a misnomer. There's no such word anywhere in the Vedas as Hindu. It doesn't exist. And so the first point is that philosophically, that is something which has been historically produced by persons who were Muslims and who could not pronounce properly anyway, they describe people living in the Hindu River, the Sindhu River, as Hindus, living on the southern side of the Sindhu River. So the word stuck. The British, of course, utilized it, and it now means people of the subcontinent of India but it didn't just mean those who practiced Sanatana Dharma, but that's actually what it means. Those who practice Sanatana Dharma. Therefore, Prabhupada says the real religion is Sanatana Dharma, which means the eternal activities of serving God. That's the religion, and again, it does not have a denominational name. If the religion is the eternal service to God, that's such a proper definition of what religion is, not Hindu, Christian, Muslim. So Prabhupada therefore says these terms are not really accurately describing the eternal relationship with God. That's Sanatana Dharma. But furthermore, Prabhupada did not want us to identify when he did not want us to identify with some geographic area. Because again, the term Hindus was meant for those who live in the subcontinent of India. Obviously, we don't live in the subcontinent of India. Vaishnava is a more appropriate term. Vaishnava means one who worships Vishnu or his expansions. So we are Gaudiya Vaishnavas, which designates us as the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who worship one of the expansions, Vishnu expansions. The origin of the Vishnu expansion is Krishna. It's called the Gaudiya Vaishnava. So that's the perfect description. The problem is that most people, if you say Gaudiya Vaishnavas, that's just a big, that's too much, that's a mouthful. They can't pronounce it, they can't understand it. As soon as you say, Hindu, at least that gives them a first location. It locates us in their mind. So for people who are not very familiar with our tradition, I may begin by explaining that we're Hindu, from the Hindu. For example, I was at a program at SMU, and someone came up and said, "Oh, you're a Buddhist." And I could have said, "No, I'm a Gaudiya Vaishnava," but that wouldn't have, they would have been, "Huh? Where's that?" But as soon as I said, "No, I'm not a Buddhist, I'm a Hindu," they said, "Oh, okay." Immediately, it gave them some location of me philosophically. Okay, you're from an Indian, tradition, and I don't know what that means, but then I can start to explain what it means. Then eventually I may come to the point of explaining actually the word Hindu doesn't exactly fit either. But by then they're already on board, they're talking. So that's why I use it. And again, I think that Prabhupada, wanted it to be clear to us, and he didn't want us to have any misconceptions. Now, after 30 years, I hope I don't have that misconception. So if I use it, it's not going to confuse me. I'm going to use it to clarify the situation. not because I'm confused by it. So I may use it sometimes. I was asked this question at the American Academy of Religion because I used the word Hindu, so a couple of scholars who were very familiar with our movement and who had been in Boston, for example, back in the early 70s, said it's very curious that you're using this word because when I used this word back in the 70s in the Boston Temple, people went to great length to convince me that it was inappropriate to use this term. So I said, well, it was in the 70s, but now it's okay. And immediately everybody said, okay, that's fine. That's a reasonable explanation. I said, it didn't work for Prabhupada in the 70s, and it works for us now. If I imagine, just like on Sunday, I can sit here and talk myself blue in the face to all of the members of our congregation, most of whom are from India, and tell them, we're not Hindus, and after a while, they may get up and walk out of here. So I'm not convinced that that's the right use of the word. Why should I do that? They're very happy to be here. They know this is a proper temple. Now I keep saying, people, the word Hindu has stuck very deeply in the subconscious of the consciousness of the Indian mentality. There are Hindus there and there are Muslims, and there's a few Christians, and even fewer Buddhists, and even fewer Jews. But mostly they're Hindus and Muslims. So you keep telling people you're a Hindu, and there are some Parsis, and there are Sikhs also. But, many people identify with this term. So if you start to just say, we're not Hindus, it may not be the best thing. It is not a bad idea. See, Prabhupada's point was this is a universal religion. He wanted to make it very clear that we're not trying to convert you from being a Christian to being a Hindu. Because if that's the case, then why bother? If this is just another denomination, what's the point? One or the other. But if we're teaching Sanatana Dharma, which is a universal principle, then what we're teaching is good for the Sikhs. It's good for the Muslims, it's good for the Christians, it's good for the Hindus, it's good for anybody. It's even good for an atheist. I mean, even I've seen people who are skeptics and practically agnostics or atheists who appreciate us. Why? Because we have some position for them. Even a person, there's some position for everyone here. Why? Because in the 12th chapter, what does Krishna say? If you can't practice the regulated practices of bhakti, work and give the results to me. If you can't work giving out the results to me, then you should work for a good cause. Any good cause, which you don't keep the results, and you'll come to the perfect point. If you can't do that, then just study, cultivate knowledge, and that will advance you. So a person who is an atheist, get this, a person who's an atheist, who's just cultivating knowledge, even though it may be atheistic knowledge. According to the Bhagavad Gita, at least he's awake. Now he's an asura, or a Mayapritagani. He's Duskratina. But still there's something above Tamagun. That is a very, very broad category to include people in. We are not pluralists, I would have to say. Now, a pluralist is different. Pluralism. This is nowadays the popular religious view. If you want to talk to people and you want to be in the in crowd, is to say you're a pluralist. A pluralist means that no one has a complete monopoly on God. No one can say that their view is the final word. Only God knows the final word. And human beings are imperfect, and religion is a product of human effort. And it can only have some portion of the truth. A different angle of vision from one. That's popular today. We don't ascribe to that. Another view is called exclusivism. Exclusivism means I have the truth, and unless you believe what I believe, you don't have the truth. Whereas another position is inclusivist. An inclusivist says, I have the truth, and you have some part of the truth. That's pretty much what Prabhupada would say. I think that fits Krishna consciousness. However, we do not say that when we say we have the truth, that doesn't mean that the truth is synonymous with the institution of ISKCON. You cannot say everyone in ISKCON has the truth, and everyone outside of ISKCON has only part of the truth. There may be people outside of ISKCON who have the truth, and there may be a lot of people in ISKCON who don't have it all. So we are not identifying the teachings, you can say, of Krishna consciousness necessarily with the society. Because sometimes you find that, especially you find that in Christianity. You know, you belong to such and such a church and you're saved. You can't make that claim. You belong to ISKCON, you're saved. That's not a fact. I wish it was so, but it's not true. So we are not going to say that it's not possible. I give you an example. I got a letter from Italy, from Krishna Loka, our book distributor, our disciple there. She tells a story that during the marathon, Prabhupada marathon, there were these devotees who were distributing in South Italy. So one young bhakta, he's not initiated yet, he went to a church and there was a priest there. And he tried to sell the priest some books. But the priest said, don't get so much anxiety about selling the books. So the devotee couldn't give it up, his anxiety. He said, I have to sell these books. I want to try to sell 150 books, big books, every day. The priest said, I can see that you're in a lot of anxiety, you're wearing yourself down, just relax. I want you to take your noon meal here and take a bath and take some rest. So finally the priest prevailed upon the devotee to take it easy. And the priest told him, come back at 4 o'clock and I'll help you. So the devotee came back and there was a service going on. And the priest, when the devotee came in, he introduced the devotee. And he told all the people that they should reach into their pockets and take out their money and buy a book from this devotee. And all 150 books were sold. Not only that, but then the priest went throughout, because it was a nice church with many boxes. They also have their boxes. And he emptied all the boxes, whatever was in all the boxes, into the devotee's bag, all the money. And then not only that, but after that he helped the devotee to count the money. And then he sent the devotee. Now, I want to know whether this priest is Krishna conscious. In fact, when I heard this, I thought this priest is more Krishna conscious than I am. I really did feel that way. I mean, I really do feel that way, because I would never have done that. I could never have done that. I could not do that. That priest is really Krishna conscious. He's beyond designations. I'm a Christian, this is some Hare Krishna. He's not thinking about that. He could understand this devotee. He was deeply impressed by this devotee. He understood that the money will be better served by giving it to this devotee and his use of the money than anything we can do at this church with this money. And I think that is really Krishna conscious. So I don't think that we can just conclude that unless someone is, in this movement, that they're just not as fortunate as we are. Well, that may be so on one level, but I mean to say they may be more advanced than a lot of people in this movement. I don't say that's always true, and I'm not saying that now you should just say, yeah, that's always, but it may be true. It may very well be true. So inclusivism means that you have a philosophy which you believe to be the complete, truth, and that other philosophies or theologies are some part of that. And that pretty much, I think, suits what Prabhupada would say. And it's not very popular, by the way. It's more popular than exclusivism, but it is not as popular as pluralism. But what can we do? That's the way we feel. Rasi Kingdom.
Here Prabhupada mentions that it mentions impersonal own karma. Once you concentrate on the issue. But in a lot of mantras we have the pranava there, the om.
Yeah.
So how should we see that?
You see that you're concentrating on Om, you're fulfilling the Vedic requirement to meditate on Om. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, very good. What is your problem?
There's this conception that all is always personal.
Who has that concern?
Most of the mantras.
Then don't say, just say Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. You want to drop it off? Read it. It's in the Bhagavad Gita. Omkar. Krishna says, I am the Omkar. Pranama Om. How can you say it's impersonal? Krishna is personal. If it's preferred by impersonalists, then we chant Om, we're not meditating on the impersonal feature of God. I bet you are. If that's the case, then stop chanting it. If it makes you become an impersonalist. It hasn't had that effect on me. It didn't have that effect on Dhruva Maharaj. He chanted Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya and Vishnu appeared. Very good.
Doesn't the word Om Aguirre represent Krishna?
There are so many explanations. But for Krishna, the absolute truth is contained in the Pranama Om mantra. It's not different than Krishna. Yes?
Also, every devotion I noticed at the end of his introduction, it's on class up. He says, this should always be there. When one is doing something of the absolute truth, glorification of Krishna is right here from the on class up.
Yeah, I remember whenever I hear Om Tat Sat, I'm always reminded of Umami Maharaj. Umami Maharaj makes a joke about people who are in a hurry to offer their food. And they make a quick offering, Om Tat Sat, thanks a lot. Yeah, they eat. Om Tat Sat, thanks a lot. Yes, Om Tat Sat, the absolute truth. But again, everything depends on the mind of the chanter. It really does. If the Mayavadi can chant and worship Radha and Krishna, it proves that the worship of the deity has to do more with the mind of the heart than anything else. Worship is done by the mind and the heart. If your mind and heart is not, that's the whole point. The whole point is to melt the heart, to soften the heart, to bring feeling into the heart. Not mechanical. But mechanicals will get you there to begin with. Start with mechanics, but it's got to go beyond that. It is said, if when hearing the holy names of the Lord, one's heart does not melt, and tears do not flow from the eyes, then one is considered to be, as a heart made of iron or stone.
Is it possible that one could be a elevated devotee and maybe someone in another religion and he would...
An elevated to meat eater?
Well, yeah, like you spoke about the priest.
Make sure Dhananjaya doesn't go, please. Elevated, does he know he's not going? Looks like he's walking away. Elevated meat eater? Yes, someone could be an elevated meat eater, but he would need a little, he or she should get elevated further.
Is it possible that because maybe they would be fully absorbed in devotional service in their own religion, that they might not have to take a million births in the animal kingdom?
Well, they might not have to take a million births, but you see, if you have a taste for eating meat and blood, it's very hard to enter into the kingdom of God and everything else. That's the problem.
Is it possible maybe they just eat whatever's given and they don't worry about food?
It's possible, but it's unlikely. And as it is said, ignorance is no excuse. So the fact that they're doing this, why would they put into that position? Because there is some sinfulness from the past. That they got their birth in a situation where they're now unique. You follow what I'm saying? So, there's a karmic reaction to this. And unless there's some extraordinary forgiveness on the part of God, which is always possible, then they have to suffer some type of reaction or get purified from that eating tendency. Unless God wants to take them back, I mean, that's possible. And who are we to say, you can't do that? Hey, wait a moment, don't you know that there's yamas, there's laws? Well, Krishna intervenes, it's possible. If God wants to intervene on someone's behalf, anything is possible. But that's extraordinary mercy. And Prabhupada said, you don't wait around for extraordinary mercy. So it is unlikely that a person who is a mediator would directly go back to the kingdom of God. But they may be very elevated. I mean, there are so many people sitting in this room who were once mediators. Now let's consider that point. They were once mediators, and now after taking Krishna consciousness, they stopped eating meat. So do you still have to take all those sinful births? Yes or no? Okay, so what we say, no, by performing devotional service, your past sins are mitigated. Right? Okay, but now someone may be doing a lot of devotional service while still eating meat. So certainly a lot of their past sins and present sins are mitigated by the devotional service. But because they're still eating meat, there may be something lingering. Just like it's said in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Anyway, it says there that one's sinful past sins have stopped. One can perform devotional service with steadiness. The next point is this. To what degree does one know about God and His kingdom? If the consciousness at the moment of death determines one's future, I want to know if these mediators really understand who God is. I think that they may have a conception of God's mercy and compassion, but do they really have the ability to focus on the transcendental name form? Our philosophy is that you have to be absorbed in the name, Nama, Rupa, Guna, Lila of Krishna to go back to the kingdom of God. That's not the philosophy of Christianity, however, or Islam or any other. They don't say that. They have a different philosophy. But again, we say that you only have part of the truth. We're not pluralists. So we say you have to come to the point of knowing God as a supreme personality, His name, form, qualities, pastimes, and be totally in love with Him, ecstatically in love with Him, to be able to transcend material existence and go back to God. That's what we say. We're inclusivists. We say that you've got a lot going for you. You're on the way, and you've got some further to go. Otherwise, if we don't say that, then we become pluralists. And pluralists, that's another thing altogether. That's not good. I think we're going to stop now. It is getting late, 8:45. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.